Have you ever found yourself just lying awake, maybe staring at the ceiling, asking yourself, is staying here, is it really worth it?
Oh, yeah, that feeling.
It's something so many people feel, right? Even if you're in one of those, elite companies. That sounds familiar? Well, you're definitely not alone.
Definitely not.
The research we looked at, it actually shows that something like 1 out of every 2 people in modern society is considering a job change.
1 out of 2. That's
It
huge.
really is. It points to, well, a lot of anxiety, but also maybe a lot of opportunity.
And that's exactly what we want to get into in this deep dive. We're trying to move beyond just, collecting facts.
Right.
The goal is really to help you build this powerful job-hopping mindset. Or maybe think of it as career pivot thinking.
Career pivot thinking, I like that.
Yeah. We're going to unpack a really unique framework for figuring out your actual professional worth and making smarter choices.
Mm.
And it's all drawn from this fascinating source material that kind of weaves together a personal story with really concrete strategies.
Okay, that sounds like exactly what people need right now.
Mm.
So we're going to challenge some of those old school views on employment, maybe reveal some surprising truths about, how long careers really last and what actually leads to fulfillment.
Hmm.
Forget the old ideas about loyalty and just sticking it out. Today, we're diving into what truly matters when you're thinking about that next big move.
Let's do it.
So let's start with a big one, maybe a bit provocative. Why do you actually get paid?
Yeah, that's fundamental.
Our source really challenges us here. It asks, are you someone who just, quote, breathes at the whim of your superior? Or are you someone who moves according to the market?
That's such a stark contrast.
It really is. What's the immediate takeaway if you start seeing yourself in that second way, the market way?
Well, the second you embrace that market view, you start realizing you're the one defining your worth. It's not just your boss.
Okay.
And to really get that, you have to define your market value.
Yeah.
Which isn't just your salary now. It's your worth across the whole industry, the wider market, even society.
Right.
The source we dug into uses this really powerful analogy. View yourself as a commodity.
A commodity. That sounds a bit cold, maybe.
It can sound that way initially, but think about it like this. Employment becomes a transaction, not a lifelong pact. And just understanding that simple idea, which honestly gets overlooked a lot, that's the first real step towards professional freedom.
That shift in perspective.
Mhm.
Wow, that alone is huge. Okay, so if I see myself as a commodity, how do I actually figure out what that commodity is worth?
Good question. The framework we're looking at introduces this thing called the market value cuboid model.
Okay, a cuboid.
Yeah, stick with me. It basically says your salary potential isn't just some random number. It's determined by 3 key factors.
Right, what's the first one?
First is technical assets, and this breaks down into 2 bits. There's professionalism. Think of that as your specific toolkit, what you're trained to do. Coding maybe, or accounting, or sales techniques. These are skills you mostly pick up in your 20s.
Got it. Role-specific stuff.
Exactly. And then there's experience. That's more like your master craftsmanship. Broader, transferable wisdom, leading teams, handling tricky projects. That becomes really crucial as you mature, typically in your 30s.
Okay, skills and experience. Makes sense.
But here's the kicker. Your value isn't just having the skills. It skyrockets if hardly anyone else has your unique mix. Scarcity.
Ah, scarcity. Right. Supply and demand for me.
Precisely. And the source has some specific advice here, too. For women, it really emphasizes building that professionalism before having children, because it's just plain harder to learn brand new, deep skills while juggling family responsibilities.
That's practical advice.
And for what it calls ordinary people, which, let's be honest, is most of it, the focus shouldn't just be on raw talent you were born with. It's about where you choose to fight, using your experience strategically.
So choose your battles based on your experience.
Interesting. What's the second factor in the cuboid?
Second is human assets. Basically your connections, your network.
Ah, the network. Right. Now, this might seem less critical when you're in your 20s, maybe. But our analysis shows these become extremely important by the time you hit your 40s.
Why the shift?
Well, these are the people who vouch for you, who advocate for you, who might even open doors to opportunities you'd never find otherwise, way beyond your current company.
Okay, so technical skills, network. What's the third side of this cuboid?
This one might surprise you. It's industry productivity.
Industry productivity. How does that affect my salary?
Massively. This is, kind of surprisingly, often the most significant factor. The source points out there can be a staggering, wait for it, 20 times difference in per capita gross profit between industries.
20 times. Seriously.
Seriously, think about what that means. Your salary potential is heavily influenced not just by how brilliant you are, but by how much wealth your whole industry is generating.
So some industries just have more money to go around.
Exactly. If you're in a highly productive sector, there's simply more value being created, which means more can potentially flow to employees. This makes your choice of industry absolutely critical, especially if your technical skills or network aren't, super developed yet.
Wow. Okay. That really reframes things.
And what's really fascinating is how these pieces, skills, network, industry economics, they don't just float around separately.
Right.
They actually come together to give you a clear, you could even say calculable, picture of your worth outside your current job.
So you can actually calculate it.
The source even gives you a tool, 9 questions you can ask yourself. They cover your skills, their shelf life, how much demand there is for you, your support system, the industry outlook. It's a whole assessment to give you real clarity.
Thinking about that shelf life for skills, that brings us to another really interesting point about jobs themselves.
Yeah.
You mentioned market value, but the source goes further. It suggests jobs themselves have a shelf life. Tell us about that.
Yeah, it's a really powerful lens. Think of jobs like products, they have a life cycle. The source outlines 4 stages.
Okay.
First, the niche market. This is where a job starts out. Few people do it, so replaceability is low. Not many positions available.
Like a brand new field.
Exactly. Then it evolves into the star phase. More people jump in, the work gets more defined, more formalized.
Right, it's becoming established.
Then comes the routine phase. This is where it gets standardized, highly replaceable. Basically, anyone can do it. Think call center scripts, maybe? Right. Because that leads to the final stage.
Yeah.
Disappearance, mechanization, automation. Think about freight handlers decades ago, or maybe certain data entry roles today. The human effort gets replaced.
And the key takeaway.
Being stuck in that routine phase really hammers your market value. It often just erodes it over time because you're so easily replaceable.
That makes total sense. And it connects straight to this idea of riding the upward elevator.
Exactly.
If your job's heading towards routine or disappearance, you need to be looking for that elevator going up. You mentioned the smartphone game industry after 2010.
Yeah, perfect example. Explosive growth. If you were a game developer then, your skills just inherently became more valuable because the whole sector was booming. You were on the up elevator.
So the industry's momentum carries you.
Absolutely. Connecting this back, your industry's path can multiply the value of your skills or diminish it, regardless of how hard you personally work.
Like the protagonist in the source material.
Exactly. He was in printing machines, facing brutal price wars, shrinking market, a declining industry. So even though he was competent, the industry's downward slide just dragged the value of his experience down with it.
Ouch. The lesson is pretty stark then.
Choose your industry carefully. Its direction is this huge external force acting on your career.
So this really prompts a question for everyone listening. Are you on an upward trajectory right now? Or is your industry kind of pulling you down?
It's a vital checkup for your career health.
And maybe a call to action if you feel like you're on that downward slope.
Definitely.
Okay, so you've figured out your industry's elevator direction. How do you actually make a strategic move? The material talks about this pivot concept.
Yes, the pivot. It's about strategically shifting your focus towards growth areas, but crucially, while still leveraging the strengths you already have.
So not starting from scratch necessarily.
Right. And the core idea is to avoid becoming just a, quote, daily necessity inside your company. That easily replaceable part.
The cog in the machine. How do you spot those growth areas to pivot towards?
The source gives 2 main methods. The first one's probably more straightforward. Focus on venture companies.
Venture companies. Why them specifically?
Well, strong venture companies, the ones getting investment, they're almost always playing in growth markets. They have to be to attract that funding. They're quick to jump on social trends, too.
How do you find them?
You can do some research. Search things like industry venture companies. Check job sites. Look specifically for companies that mention recent external investment. That's usually a strong signal of potential and market confidence.
Okay, that makes sense. What's the second method? You said it was harder.
Yeah, potentially harder, but maybe more rewarding. It's focus on breaking industry inefficiencies.
Breaking inefficiencies? Like what?
It means looking for sectors that are kind of stuck, doing things in old, maybe illogical ways, ripe for disruption. The source uses education as a classic example.
How so?
Think about how static teaching methods often are, even with all the tech we have now, right? The internet's changed everything, but classroom delivery often hasn't kept pace.
True.
The idea is to bet on these sleeping diamonds, concepts that make perfect logical sense, but maybe the mainstream is dismissing them right now. It takes a bit more vision, maybe some courage to spot those.
Spotting the obvious in hindsight ideas before they're obvious.
Exactly. It's about seeing where the system isn't working optimally and figuring out how to be part of the solution. That requires a different kind of insight than just following the funding.
This really drives home that idea you mentioned earlier. Talent has differences, but positioning is equal. Your strategic choices about where you apply your skills can matter even more than just how much raw talent you have. So, okay, putting this all together, what does it mean for actually finding that next job, that next opportunity?
Well, once you're looking, you need criteria for choosing.
Right. Choosing your next ship, as the source calls it.
Yeah. And the framework gives us 3 crucial standards to evaluate a potential employer. First, market value growth. Will this move enhance your value in the broader market?
Okay, logical.
Second, a comfortable work environment.
Interesting. We often think we have to sacrifice comfort for growth or value.
That's a common assumption, but the source challenges it. It suggests they often align long-term, which leads to the third standard, growth potential both for the company and for you within it.
Okay, let's unpack that comfort piece. Why does the source link a comfortable environment to market value? That seems counterintuitive.
It's actually a really profound connection. Think about it. When a company hits hard times, what happens internally?
Politics, backstab.
Often, yes. And the source argues that it's usually the employees who lack strong market value, who don't feel they have options outside, who resort to those cruel internal politics to protect their own position.
Desperation breeds bad behavior.
Exactly. It
Okay.
creates a toxic, stressful environment. The protagonist in the source material had this direct experience with a senior colleague, Uyama, who basically threw him under the bus.
Right.
That kind of thing happens when people feel trapped. So a comfortable environment often exists where people feel secure because they have market value and options. The comfort stems from security, not complacency.
That makes a scary amount of sense. Okay, so how do you assess that growth potential, the third standard, especially from the outside during interviews?
The source gives some really concrete questions to ask. Don't just ask what are the opportunities. Ask things like, what tasks are truly needed right now? What kind of talent are you genuinely seeking for those tasks?
Getting specific.
Very specific. Also ask, who are your top performers and why are they succeeding? What makes them stand out here? And crucially, for anyone changing jobs, where do mid-career hires typically succeed within this company? Do they integrate well? Do they get key projects?
Those questions really dig beneath the surface.
They have to. You need to understand the real dynamics, not just the HR pitch.
And what about spotting good versus bad venture companies specifically? You mentioned focusing on them earlier.
Right. The source gives some clear red flags and green flags using this example of a company called Tanabe Technology that the protagonist nearly joined.
And what were the red flags there?
Big one. Claiming no competitors in a supposed blue ocean market. That's often a huge warning sign. It could mean it's actually just a staffing agency pretending to be an IT firm churning through people.
The body shop model.
Exactly. Look out for high turnover, maybe unusually low hiring standards. Another red flag is a lack of genuine in-house R&D, or being heavily reliant on outside job agencies to find talent.
Okay, so what are the green flags then?
Companies that openly acknowledge their competitors and can talk intelligently about their growth. That shows realism,
Right.
a willingness to let you speak with actual frontline employees, not just managers or HR. That's huge for getting the real picture.
Definitely.
And decent peer evaluation. Check online reviews like Glassdoor, sure, but always compare them laterally. How does this company stack up against similar companies in the same space? Don't look at reviews in a vacuum.
Good point. Context matters.
And one more important caveat. Don't rely solely on financial statements.
Really? Why not?
Especially for modern companies, their biggest assets like data, user networks, proprietary algorithms, often aren't fully captured on a traditional balance sheet. So the financials might not show the true strength or potential. You have to dig deeper than just the numbers.
So it's a qualitative assessment too. And what about joining as a mid-career hire versus a fresh graduate?
It's a critical distinction. As a mid-career hire, you really need to understand the company's culture towards people joining later. Are they truly integrated, or are they seen as outsiders?
And how your role fits in.
Yes. Does your role align with the company's core engine? Is it
Mhm.
central to how they compete and win, whether that's sales, R&D, marketing, whatever? You ideally want to be close to that engine, not stuck out on the periphery.
Okay, this is all super practical advice for choosing the right next step. Now let's zoom out a bit. Let's talk about the act of job hopping itself.
Right. The stigma around it.
Exactly. But our source presents a really powerful idea that regretting job change is a negative excuse. It actually frames job hopping as a form of self-empowerment.
Yeah, even potentially a societal good.
How so?
It allows individuals to be honest about their real worth in the market, and it forces companies to adapt to stay competitive for talent, which ultimately makes them stronger, and the overall economy more dynamic.
So it's not about disloyalty, it's about market efficiency.
In a way, yes. And personally, cultivating that option to quit, having that job-hopping mindset, even if you don't constantly hop, it creates this incredible sense of freedom and confidence.
How does that help day to day?
It means you can face challenges at work, even difficult bosses or situations, from a position of equality. You know you have alternatives, you're not trapped. That changes the whole dynamic. It's empowering.
Knowing you can walk away gives you the strength to stay and negotiate, perhaps.
Precisely. But it's not just about your own mindset. The source also really highlights the need for a reliable support system.
Ah, yes. The people around you.
Remember the protagonist's colleague, Yokota? The one who bravely blew the whistle on corporate fraud?
Yeah, that was intense.
That story just powerfully illustrates how crucial trustworthy relationships are, especially when you're making tough career choices or, facing ethical dilemmas. You really can't navigate these things completely alone.
So true. Which brings up another tricky aspect, talking to loved ones, especially partners. How do you explain a major career shift?
Yeah, that's often the hardest conversation, and it raises that question. Are you willing to be vulnerable, to connect emotionally, not just logically?
The source had a framework for this, or
It did. A really helpful three-step approach. First, logic. Clearly lay out the rational reasons, why this makes sense from a market value perspective, industry trends, etc.
Okay, the head stuff.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But then, second, empathy. This is crucial. Connect on an emotional level. Share your feelings, your excitement, maybe your fears too. And acknowledge their fears. Don't just talk abstractly about market value. Talk about what it means for your shared life.
The heart stuff.
And finally, third, trust. Ultimately, they need to trust you, the person they know and love, to make the best decision you can for your collective future. It's a delicate balance between head and heart.
That's a really thoughtful approach. I wonder, for those listening, what stands out to you about managing those tough conversations? How could you apply that empathy and trust framework? It's often the biggest hurdle, isn't it?
It really can be.
So we've covered the strategies, the navigation, the market value. But what about the deeper why? Is work just about survival, about paying the bills, or can it be something more, a source of real purpose?
That's the ultimate question, isn't it?
The source touches on this with the mentor character, Kurowa Jin. There's this surprising reveal about his motivations. They weren't just about money.
Right. He was involved in volunteer work, helping kids, trying to shake up corporate stagnation. Things driven by something other than just financial gain. It makes you think about what really drives us.
And this leads to another interesting distinction the source makes: to-do types versus being types.
Yes, this is fascinating. To-do types are people who define their work by tangible achievements. Building a product, closing a huge deal, publishing a paper. They need those milestones. But being types, and here's the surprising part, they define work more by the state they want to be in. Feeling respected, making an impact, being creative, feeling fulfilled.
And the source says most people are.
So source suggests 99% of people are actually being types.
Wow, 99%.
Which is incredibly liberating, I think. It means you don't necessarily need that one single earth-shattering passion to find fulfilling work. That pressure most of us feel. Maybe it's misplaced.
That's a huge weight off the shoulders for a lot of people listening, I bet. Okay, so if I'm likely a being type, how do I figure out what kind of work actually brings me that feeling, that sense of joy or fulfillment?
The source gives two really practical methods to uncover this.
Yeah.
First, look at what others praise you for, but you don't even realize is special.
Things that come easily to me.
Exactly. Stuff you do almost effortlessly, maybe even unconsciously, that other people consistently notice and compliment. That's often a clue to your natural strengths and inclinations.
Okay, pay attention to compliments. What's the second method?
Look for what you do without feeling pressure. Think about the small tasks within your daily work. Which ones do other people seem to find stressful or tedious, but you kind of just do them, maybe even enjoy them a little?
The things that don't feel like work.
Precisely. Those little moments of ease or flow, even in mundane tasks, can point towards your true vocation, the activities that align with your natural state of being.
Finding your vocation in the small things. I like that.
But finding enjoyable tasks isn't quite enough. You also need balance. The source talks about tension and relaxation balance.
Tension and relaxation, like stress management.
Sort of, but more nuanced. Think about games. The best games aren't just easy relaxation. They have challenge, tension, right. But it's good tension. Work needs that too for sustained enjoyment.
Okay, so how do you measure this balance?
The source suggests a simple exercise. Over, say, 6 months, just jot down your work tensions as they arise, then categorize them.
Good tension versus bad tension.
Exactly. If the bad tensions, like toxic politics, bureaucratic hurdles, deeply unfulfilling tasks, consistently add up to more than, say, 10 significant instances over those 6 months, that's a strong indicator it's time for a change.
A quantifiable warning sign.
And conversely, if the good tensions, things like challenging projects, learning new skills, healthy external competition number fewer than maybe 3 significant instances, that suggests you might be stagnating and should probably seek more challenging roles or projects.
Finding that sweet spot between stressful and boring.
That's the goal for long-term satisfaction and growth. It's such a practical way to gauge if a role is truly working for you.
I can definitely see how that imbalance, too much bad tension or too little good tension, really drains you over time. It's like a professional early warning system.
It really is.
Okay, one last piece of advice from the source for shaping your career. This idea of labeling yourself.
Ah, yes, the personal slogan.
Tell me more. It sounds a bit like personal branding.
It is, in a way. The idea is to consciously give yourself a unique label. Something like new market genius, or client relationship builder, or process optimization wizard.
Even if it feels a bit aspirational at first.
Especially then. These labels act like a compass. They help solidify your professional identity in your own mind and in the minds of others. They guide your choices, what projects you take, what skills you develop, and ultimately they make you less generic, less replaceable. They define your unique value proposition.
So you sort of grow into the label you create for yourself.
That's the idea. It helps you stand out and shape your path intentionally.
Okay, so wrapping this all up, we've covered a lot. From market value and industry elevators to pivoting strategies, choosing the right company, and even finding joy. The big takeaway seems to be that job change isn't just about swapping one desk for another or getting a raise.
Not at all. It's fundamentally about unlocking growth. For yourself, yes, but as we discussed, maybe even for the companies in the market around you by keeping things dynamic and honest.
And remembering that the biggest hurdle often isn't the actual risk involved in making a change.
Right. It's often our own internal barriers, vanity maybe, or just plain fear of the unknown.
So what's the final provocative thought you want to leave our listeners with today, drawing from all this?
I think it comes down to this. The only guaranteed path to failure, in a sense, is indecision when a choice really needs to be made. If you're facing 2 genuinely good options, honestly, either choice is probably fine. Just choose.
Don't get paralyzed.
Exactly. But the critical underlying truth is to embrace the fact that the market is constantly evolving. You have to adapt. And maybe most importantly, you have to trust yourself to navigate it.
Trust yourself. That's powerful. Well, this deep dive hopefully has given you a shortcut, the frameworks, the insights, the different ways to think about your career. But the real journey, making those choices, figuring out your next step, that's all yours. We really encourage you to take some time, reflect on your own situation, and think about what moves you might make with this powerful new mindset.